What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. As always, I'm your host, Jacob Kelly, and today's podcast is powered by Trufan. And today is an episode of The Social Report. And The Social Report is a monthly podcast in conjunction with Trufan, where we sit down and talk about some of the most interesting influencer marketing and social media news from the last month. Today, I am joined, as always, by Trufan CMO Karen O'Brien and Trufan advisor Scott Birdie. Welcome back to the podcast.
Yo.
Thanks.
My pleasure. I'm excited to have you both back. And where I want to start today, I want to start with Spotify. And I want to talk about Spotify for a couple of reasons. And the first thing that I want to talk about Spotify was Spotify is just the newest competitor to enter into the Clubhouse space. And they launched Spotify Green Rooms, which is essentially their version of Clubhouse. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to Spotify was they just signed an exclusive podcast contract with Call Her Daddy, which is a very popular, we'll say, relationships and dating podcast, for $60 million over 3 years. So $20 million a year for 3 years. So she's going to be exclusive to Spotify, which is just insane. I know it's not Joe Rogan numbers, but still, when you consider the fact that she started her podcast only a couple of years ago and already it's that big. But what I want to talk about when it comes to with considering these two pieces of news, with Spotify launching Green Rooms now, that you have the audio rooms on Spotify, Clubhouse, Twitter. I think Facebook is working on one. And when you look at the podcast side, Call Her Daddy and as well as the Joe Rogan is also exclusive to Spotify. There's a number of other Spotify exclusive. I know there's other places that are signing exclusive podcast rights. There's a bunch of different ways to go with this, but one of the ones that I'm really curious about is the decentralization of the internet. I feel like I was talking to Scott before we jumped on here, is you used to look at cable and people were cable cutting because they didn't want to have to pay for all the different channels. But now if you just look at streaming with a Netflix and you want to watch a specific movie, like you have to have Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Crave up here in Canada, HBO Max, I believe is like the equivalent in the States. On the podcasting front, like if you want to listen to Joe Rogan now, you have to at least download Spotify. You don't need to pay for it, but there are many podcasts behind paywalls. So I'm curious what you think of kind of inspired by these announcements from Spotify. Is just the decentralization of the internet as everything's kind of breaking apart and going behind paywalls on different websites.
I mean, from my perspective with Green Room specifically, if anyone has permission to do something like that, I think it's Spotify. Marketers love Spotify. And, part of, I think, what made Clubhouse cool was going in there and seeing people that you thought you'd never get a chance to be in a room with, like celebrities, thought leaders, influencers. And Spotify definitely has the relationships and the portfolio and the pull to bring those people to the table. So I would say, I'm excited to see what they do. As a marketer, I'm pretty sure that it's going to do well.
Do we know if this is like a iOS and Android? I'm guessing
That's a good
it
question.
Runs through the Spotify app.
I think it might be a separate app. I could be wrong on that. What do I have here? Yeah, it's a new mobile app from Spotify.
Okay, I'm assuming maybe they probably launched it on both then. Because initially I was also thinking, is Clubhouse still just on Apple or iOS?
They just recently, within the last probably 4-6 weeks, came over to Android.
Okay, that's good. Because I mean, it's crazy the timing and the competition that goes on. Like I feel like had Spotify been able to do this, maybe like 2 months ago, the amount of users they probably could have snatched before Android users hopped onto Clubhouse would have been pretty substantial to kind of just continue to own that market share, if you will. Considering, like I sort of think about the battle between Apple Podcasts and Spotify now for podcasting share or listenership, if you will. And I feel like they certainly have a lot of iPhone users, but probably own that Android market because natively, like I personally will use Apple Podcasts to listen to podcasts just because I have iPhones and like Apple products. So I don't know, that was just some, like, my head went there. In terms of the decentralization, everything's getting more expensive on the internet. I think like just more content or layers essentially, just because of like how complex marketing is becoming and funnels are becoming. So like ungated versus gated content, like, sort of blur there. You look at like platforms like this, to piggyback off of what Karen was saying, I immediately think about the strategy for music marketing and podcast marketing suddenly changing, because like although you can link to stuff through Clubhouse, and you have your bio and such there, like there's sort of there must be some sort of integrated approach that Spotify's added into the green room, so that artists, if you were to get on and say like host a green room, that you can naturally have some way to like promote your channel and like look for either more saves or more follows and something like that. Um, Equally for the podcasting side, I think of like a $60 million deal, like that probably comes on the hinge of, hey, we're launching green room and we're going to expect that you're hosting like what would have potentially been club hosting, or um, basically just becoming once a week green room, so that like by virtue of doing that, you're also driving people into that ecosystem more and more and more. Like, I don't know. I mean, one thing really jumps out for sure is in the article you sent, being as the first time that I saw this, like I look at the picture and at first I literally thought, wow, that's a green version of Clubhouse. Ultimately, so those Clubhouse designers, those poor people, men and women over there working probably months on like, oh, what is the like when somebody speaks, like how is it engaging? It's just like everything has probably been stolen, and like welcome for Clubhouse to what it's like to be a unicorn in the tech scene in like 2021. Everybody follow suit.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think with everybody following suit, like for me, I don't know if burnt out is the right word, but like I have platform fatigue at this point. Like there's no way I'm gonna download Clubhouse and Green Room. And like I haven't since I mean, I've never really been a Call Her Daddy listener, if I'm being completely honest, but with Joe Rogan, like I would listen to him every once in a while before the Spotify deal. And now that he's on Spotify, I don't listen to Rogan at all because I don't enjoy Spotify's user interface when it comes to podcasting. So I stick to my podcasting app. And I didn't come over with that exclusive deal. So it's going to be interesting to see if Spotify's seeing the value from these exclusive deals, because I don't think the entire audience is migrating over. Like I catch clips of Joe Rogan on YouTube because he still posts clips there, but not the full interviews. And like all the comments are just about how I haven't listened to a full episode since Spotify, like not the same since Spotify. Like the community on YouTube is way better. There's no community on Spotify. And so I'm curious to see if these massive 8-figure deals are going to keep happening if the audience migration isn't what they're expecting.
I think Spotify is super, super poised to compete, like Karen said, in this space right now, and could actually end up, pretty significantly undercutting what would have been a massive continued valuation increase on Clubhouse's side. Just the more you think about it, like there's a lot of advantages that they can probably offer people. And equally on the marketing side, I sort of think about like, remember when they came out with those stats? And I think they were kind of first to market
Data
with that on,
driven.
yeah, listenership. And they're kind of had the dual sides for like listeners plus artists, and how that just created crazy UGC. They beat Apple, if I'm not mistaken, to kind of doing that. And that was like a really, super tactical and like guerrilla marketing. And I think how they can kind of bring those expertise to this platform and apply it there before Clubhouse really has wits around like what to do with all this data that they're probably ingesting right now. Like that could be a big benefit for them too. But anyways, this is
Spotify
interesting
did a
news.
great job of monetizing podcasts. They really did, and building them up. And I think from their perspective, they could probably never have enough quality audio content. And so I think something like this is a great bet for them. What I would say though, if I looked at sort of the offering that they also have something called gems, which feels a bit like Twitch bits. Like basically you give gems to speakers that you like, or people in rooms that you like. So they're kind of trying to gamify it a little bit too, I think. It's
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
And part of the announcement, I believe they'll be introducing a creator fund for green rooms. So similar to the TikTok creator fund or YouTube's creator fund, like paying people to use the platform and when they get listeners and stuff like that.
Kind of a smart brand name too, the Green Room.
Yeah, no, I like it.
Can I jump in on that notion for a second? I would always wonder, the more you continue to dominate this potential audio ecosystem, or like if you can, I guess, position yourself in a place to dominate it, like they're trying to right now. Would you maybe flip the script and look at backing some sort of actual coin, if you will, at a certain point, like an entertainment, right? Like, not that there would be maybe a ton of like future use on an economical side, but to actually incentivize people to come back to the app. Like I think of an app called Buns, for example, that like launched in Toronto, and it was like a totally separate idea. It was focused on like commerce and bartering, but people could get asked a question every single day and you get rewarded, to your point, like these types of like things that right now are kind of used in this sense to like donate to creators. But I mean, if you really want to start owning the listenership side or the usership side, like giving back to those users a little bit for listening more often, and especially in a scenario where like people are going to start to spend like hours and hours and hours and hours on Spotify listening to people talk and sing, or musicians, right? It's like, man, that could be something that you might see down the road in 5 to 10 years. Like, be so powerful. Like, I'd start using Spotify if I got paid to do it. Sure.
My question with that is, first, from Spotify's perspective, like, other than people, I guess, because I don't think you need a subscription to Spotify to use Green Room. So how do you monetize that? Like, has Clubhouse launched any monetization? Like, you can't roll an ad over a live conversation, right? It's like, how are they? Do you anyone have any idea how they're going to monetize this?
I don't
I'm
really
sure it's
know.
advertising. It's
Yeah.
probably there's got to be advertising somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Maybe like a pop up when you have to wait like the 15 seconds before you can get into the green room or something like that, and you have to listen or
But
watch the ad.
it is in itself an advertisement. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just think about this, like, it's a cycle that's bringing more people to Spotify, which inevitably is probably going to result in them listening to music over time on Spotify, or podcasts, either one.
Well, I was going to say what they'll probably roll out, I would imagine, is make it a very easy process to have your green room recorded and upload as a podcast as soon as you're done, which then gets
Yeah.
people to the Spotify app on the back end. Or you could even probably do with it being a green room. I mean, you could do like album, like listen parties, and like artists could jump on green rooms and play their album, and people could be there, and they could, after each track, they could talk about it to the people in the green room and stuff like that. So I think
I
there's
think they're going
ways.
into sports and entertainment all broadly, right? So like they could have sports like game watch parties, and
Mm,
I
yeah.
think it could be way, 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 way extended.
The possibilities.
Only the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, what do you got?
Um, I put a little bit of where I guess I brought a little bit of news to the table about the NFL. They, over the past month, it was about a week ago from when we were recording this, announced an official partnership with Diageo as the first ever spirit sponsor. And the reason I brought it up was not so much on like the partnership side, but a little bit more thinking about like, what does that mean for the future of kind of like partnership marketing, community marketing, influencer marketing, particularly for sports as well. But like sort of looking at like a bit of the description behind, where they're going to be activating this partnership, if you will. Obviously on site. So I think there's going to be that digital on site component, as well as obviously experiential on site component where they're going to be tastings and all sorts of ways to try drinks or engage with the actual brand. And then it's also going to follow suit to broadcast digital social content, right through to the Super Bowl. And the interesting part for Diageo is they can feature and sort of weave different brands, into different types of campaigns, or really all sorts of different storylines, if you will. And I think coming off the back of NBA, I believe endorsed Hennessy as like an official spirit sponsor, which was again like one of the first spirit sponsors for the first time. It's like one kind of another open door in the alcohol, beverage space for potential cultural marketing and that community marketing. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to open it up for conversation and see what you thought of, one, that partnership, and two, what this sort of means. Like, I have some other questions, even on the note of, this 5-10 years down the road, does that mean there'll be cannabis sponsors potentially coming into play, as that gets legalized? Like, who knows what 20 years has?
What surprises you about it? Because I'm not surprised. Like large brands with big media budgets tend to be sports sponsors.
I'm not
So
surprised, but this is the first ever spirit sponsor for the NFL. So it means that sports are actually opening the door up into, hey, one, we've got, need for revenue, need for dollars, because of probably still hurting from the COVID
declining
disaster.
viewership.
And then,
Yep.
of course, the declining viewership. So, like, they need to start activating, as a brand, NFL and the entity, through their other channels more and more and more. So you start to see like the social and the digital components of this activation coming into play. Um, I just think about like, if I'm Diageo going further, starting to look at potential partnerships and sponsorships with then players to sort of weave and then integrate this, right? With the partnership side on the NFL into potentially content that's coming out on players' accounts. Like, I just think and a cultural side of marketing, are these types of partnerships that are just so highly integrated throughout digital and in-person experience kind of the key for brands as we come into this kind of post-COVID era, if you will? Because stadiums are going to be, I'd imagine, for NFL full capacity when it kicks off.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. But if I take a step back, put on my brand marketing hat, there's a bigger problem or opportunity with NFL, right? It's that they haven't fully embraced their players using social. And therefore they haven't gotten the amplification and content that they could have had. That's just my opinion.
Mm.
Unlike
True.
the NBA, who has fully embraced.
Well, I think
that.
like NHL is probably even another like similar to the
Yeah.
the
And I
NFL.
mean, no judgment. It just is, it is the position that they have taken, right? But I think it hasn't helped when we're in a lockdown, it hasn't helped them. So if you're Diageo, you're going to want a lot of digital social activation with somebody like the NBA or the NHL.
I was surprised that it was the first official because I feel like when it comes, I was thinking, I guess because it's spirit and not alcohol, right? Like beer
has kind
still.
of been the long association. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting that it's taken this long, especially because I feel like working in sponsorships and partnerships, like you're very open to different sponsorships. Because the more sponsorships you have, the more money coming in. So I was definitely surprised that it was the first spirit sponsor ever. And to your question there, you mentioned there at the end about cannabis. I would not be shocked if 5-10 years for sure there's cannabis sponsors, because I think a lot of players in all leagues would push for cannabis to be allowed. Like I've listened to the Spit and Chicklets podcast, which is hockey specific podcast. And they've talking about trying to get marijuana off the banned substance list because it's going public or becoming legal everywhere, and it's great for recovery. It's organic, whatever. But I wouldn't be shocked if especially with players feeling more empowered to voice their opinions, if we'd see the different leagues start to relinquish kind of their stance on marijuana.
Still a banned substance for players, though, isn't it? Even in places where it's legal.
Yeah, no, it's still a banned substance, but you're hearing more so former guys talk about the fact that it shouldn't be a banned substance because it's so good for recovery and you're not getting addicted to pills and different things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. The other component of this particular sponsorship that I thought of was how even for NFL, when you spoke about declining viewership, Karen, the European and I guess specifically like United Kingdom, that market has been of huge interest to them, like the NFL in London exposure. And I think this is also like on the back of that growing in stature in future years and them having even more involvement or opportunities to attend a game in London. So I think that, I don't know if, obviously the NFL can't be too choosy, and they did land Diageo, which is arguably probably the biggest group out there. But there's a kind of split advantage for NFL doing that, I think, on when you look at like the cultural association with brands of that nature out there, like in United Kingdom and in places around Europe, where like if you're the NFL and you're trying to reach a certain audience, actually associating yourself with that brand in that market is kind of going to tighten ties, if you will. I think like I know one or two people that are friends of mine who like do watch NFL and are from the UK, and they sort of fit within that audience. Like I could definitely see them as the spirit drinker and somebody who would be getting down with one of those types of drinks, like during a game, a gin or something.
I've used, not to sort of be promotional, but I've used the Trufan tool to look at the audiences of the Diageo portfolio brands. And there is a absolute strong link between sports and entertainment and those brands. A lot of people who follow Diageo brands also follow a lot of big sports and entertainment brands.
Strong move by the NFL.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a great sponsorship, but we'll see where it goes.
What other audiences you want to chat about today there, Karen?
Well, we love niche audiences at Trufan, so we've been digging into some niche audiences for the summer. We dove into the barbecue audience globally. What was really interesting is, it's a very small niche audience as far as marketers go. We looked at about 2.8 million profiles, and kind of used the top grill brands as a proxy for that and some influencers. But I think unsurprisingly, we found out it was 75% male, 78% English speaking, mostly US based. But some interesting sort of crossovers between health, fitness, and culture. So, for example, we found that there was a huge correlation between what I would call sort of lifestyle eaters, people who were like the weightlifting, you could argue meathead crowd, like definitely are posting about barbecue a lot. Mostly, in terms of like things like paleo or keto or, even carnivore kind of diets. But then the other kind of interesting thing was vegans and vegetarians are barbecuing a lot, barbecuing vegetables. So maybe it's just people who like good food. I don't know, but I thought it was quite interesting. And then you also have sort of the body conscious people, which range from like, I'm super fit, therefore I eat barbecue, to the I am living my best life, embracing my body the way it is, and I eat whatever I want and everything in between. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We also saw a strong correlation between, we would call it speedy kind of, focus, like NASCAR, Harley Davidson, also country music. So I'm painting a picture here, I think, of a very specific, stereotypical kind of barbecue person. But it was real, that's what we found. So if you're interested in seeing more about, the barbecue enthusiast and that niche audience, you can download our report and check it out. But I think it's a very interesting thing to look at these niche audiences and see what comes up.
I'm curious from your perspective, Karen, when you look at the previous two reports before this one, it was the gaming audience and the basketball audience. They're just huge audiences. So does the niche audience, does that make the insights more actionable just because it's a more manageable group of people? When you talk about 2.8 million versus, I think the basketball one, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was like over 100 million people, right? So it's like, it does, because to your point, the riches are in the niches. Does it, because it's a smaller audience, make it easier to action upon than just the scale of the previous two?
I mean, there's definite advantages of going into niche audiences, and you'll find even large brands do at some level, and some of the marketing they do go into subsegments or niches within their larger audiences. But I would say that, going into niches, basically it's less competitive. You can become an expert on that customer. You can have very tailored, personalized messages that could perform better. There's just a lot of advantages to focus overall, I would say. But like I said, every single large brand would have niche audiences. Even Nike would have, niche audiences. The woman who does this kind of sport in this way, in these regions, that likes these kind of products, you can go down, down, down. So
I think that's super interesting. It is a really cool audience to look at. Like, I mean, you brought up the vegetarian audience sort of having correlation with the group that you were analyzing, and I don't know, I wouldn't have first thought of that, but it is kind of cool to have those insights as a marketer, to think that, like, the spectrum of, if you were looking at influencer marketing and partnership as an opportunity, and the content strategy that you might start to think about, like, you could go as far wide as, like, you were talking about an influencer who's a NASCAR driver. You could probably take it down the route of, like, I don't know, somebody that I would look at, like a Jamie Foy, and skateboarding as an example, like a pro skateboarder. And then you could literally take it in the direction of, like, the audience that I really wouldn't have pictured, but where you could probably have the most opportunity to gain market share, arguably, which is like potentially a bit more of a female dominated audience. And speaking to vegans or vegetarians about like recipe options and those types of things that don't involve meat but do involve a barbecue. And I think getting to like why, like, there could be some super emotional moments that you could capture that are mixed with, like, that taste and that kind of feeling that you get when you try certain food for the first time. Because I would agree. I mean, like, I love if you have one of those little barbecue trays or whatever, and you put like tons of a mix of like peppers,
grilled veggies,
yeah,
nothing
all
better.
like zucchini and stuff like that in there. Oh, so good.
Our writer Brian said these are the 5 people you probably meet at a barbecue, and he's right. I mean, barbecue does bring everyone together on some level, but it is also a very North American focused kind of cultural phenomenon. I know people in Ireland who had to order a barbecue from Germany because they couldn't find one after they'd experienced barbecue in the United States. And then basically like ordered the barbecue from Germany. It came in, that invited everybody into their backyard. They all sat around the barbecue and like waited for burgers and, you know, hot dogs, but like they sat there with their plates and really didn't know what to do. Like, I think it's just sort of it's like the equivalent of going to the pub in the UK, or like, you know, it's the way that North Americans kind of socialize outdoors with family and friends.
Yeah, people connect over food, like you said.
Yeah.
And even differently when you look at like different types of barbecue, or I guess ways to cook meat, like I think they're like Hawaii, you know, where they'll like put it in what's that, like the cauldron type thing or something like that. But don't forget about Australia when you're talking about barbecues. You know, they love a good barbecue.
And Korean barbecue. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Korean barbecue.
Yeah.
When those places reopen, I hope that they do soon. Oh my God. That's so sad. No, but one of those that were like extra affected, the experience is not the same. It was like if I order Korean barbecue for takeout versus like you go to sit down and you have that nice, like fresh kind of cook the meat in front of you feel. Oh.
I'd love to hear from listeners, though, if there's niche audiences that they would like us to look at. We're always happy to do so.
Super.
Is there any that crock wares might be really interesting to look at.
True. That's the time. Tis the season.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned there how with even Nike with kind of breaking down their own audience into different niches, and kind of to call back to the basketball report from May. We talked about how the WNBA is just, they are some kind of untapped trendsetters that people aren't giving them the credit. Jordan Brand, this was yesterday, just announced they made history. They partnered with 11 emerging WNBA players. So to your point in tapping into the niches. So Michael Jordan, they did a shoot with Michael Jordan and 11 of these WNBA stars and rising stars to work with Jordan Brand, which I think is awesome. And again, it's niche right now, but I think the WNBA is only going to grow and grow and grow. So I think it could be a niche right now, but this could be a long-term play from Jordan, that they're kind of getting it early, that as this league continues to grow in prominence, that it's only going to become more broad, but it's niche for the time being.
I mean, for personal reasons, I love to see the WNBA rising. Love it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And sneaker culture should absolutely be a part of it if they're setting trends. Like, I think women have notoriously had to basically wear like not men's sneakers, but sneakers that were like made for men over the course of time.
And uniforms. And it was like, crazy.
Yeah, uniforms as well. So, I mean, make some like dope ass kicks for women that are actually setting trends. And that way women will have something to go to the store and be like, oh, like so-and-so wears that, and not refer to, you know, like the guy NBA player, like the guy in this sport. You need more of that. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah. Biggest takeaways: the riches are in the niches.
Absolutely.
That's a takeaway. But no, I want to thank you both. A shorter episode for you, for people listening. Shorter episode this week. We'll be back with a full episode next month. Keeping it short. Just, you know, things get busy at this time of year. You know, we got Canada Day, July 4th. Everyone's cramming to get all their work done before that. Plus, being completely honest, I'm a big fan of England football, and their kickoff is in 20 minutes from now. So I want to make sure I have time to edit this and everything before that game kicks off.
Man, Euro finishing up, like I guess in the next few weeks. Olympics are kicking off probably before we record the next podcast.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
busy time.
Happening. Yeah.
But thank you both for taking time to be on the podcast. Thank you for listening to this, whether you're listening the entire way through or you're listening bits and pieces. I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. Do me a big favor, go and follow Karen and Scott. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below so you can find it. I will also link links to all the stories that we talked about today. If you want to download the barbecue audience report, that'll be down there as well. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.